The council chamber pulsed with tension. Dozens of species sat in their crystalline seats, murmuring in a dozen dialects, each voice layered with certainty, arrogance, or fear. The topic today: a formal declaration of war against the Human Federation. Charts had been shared, casualty estimates calculated, and strategies outlined. The mood was confident. After all, how long could a young, unallied species hold out against the might of the Galactic Accord? Then the doors opened, and silence spread like frost. He entered slowly, his limbs stiff, each movement heavy with age and agony. His left leg was metal from the hip down. 2 fingers were missing from his right hand, the rest were wrapped in old scar tissue. His armor, dark green, matte, and battle-worn, bore no insignia. Just gashes. Patches. Burn marks. He didn't introduce himself. He didn't bow. He walked directly to the center platform, ignoring the glares, ignoring the elite guards that twitched at his approach. A voice finally broke the hush. "General Cathal of the Zovari," murmured one counselor. "But he's dead." Cathal dropped a data chip onto the hollow projector. It landed with a soft click, but the sound echoed like a thunderclap. "You speak of war with humans," he said, voice dry as old bone. "You prepare fleets. You tally numbers. You think they will fight like you. Or like me. But they won't. And you will lose everything." Murmurs returned, now tinged with unease. Another counselor leaned forward. "You came to threaten us?" Cathal didn't flinch. "I came to warn you." A short laugh rippled from one corner. The mighty Cathal, conqueror of the Threx clusters, now a mouthpiece for prey? His single remaining eye narrowed, unamused. "I have fought species that devour stars. Hunted beasts in dark zones where even light refuses to go. But none prepared me for humans." He tapped the chip. The hologram flickered but didn't play. He didn't care. "You want to understand them? You won't. But let me explain what you can expect." He took a long breath. "They are not the strongest. Not the fastest. Not the most intelligent. They lack the regenerative qualities of the Uli. Their ships are crude. Their biology is fragile. Their military protocols are decades behind the Accord standard. Yet we, 10 empires strong, failed to break them." He looked around the room. His eye locked on one smug diplomat after another. "We bombed their outer colonies. We reduced 3 worlds to ash. They didn't beg. They didn't sue for peace. They didn't even respond right away. They watched." Cathal paused, his voice lowering. "And then they began." He took another step forward. His leg clanked, the sound sharp against the polished floor. "They didn't match our fleets. They didn't challenge us openly. They hit where it hurt. Supply routes. Medical convoys. Research hubs. And when they couldn't destroy..." He raised a hand, trembling slightly. "They humiliated. They sent infected food back to our bases. They hacked comms to play lullabies from Earth during invasions. They painted their warships with the faces of our fallen leaders. They turned our fear into their weapon. You don't understand what it means to fight a species that evolved on a world that tried to kill them every day. That celebrates pain with laughter. That writes music for grief, and makes art from violence. You call that primitive. I call it inevitable." Cathal turned to the speaker who mocked him earlier. "Do you know what they told me when I was captured during the second cycle of the war? One human, bloodied, barely standing, looked me in the eye and said, 'This is us being nice.' Then he let me go." The chamber was silent. No one laughed now. "You think war is conquest. To them, it's grief made sharp. It's love weaponized. It's the scream of a mother whose child you burned, echoing across generations." The Council High Marshal stood, furious. "Why now? Why speak after all these cycles? After vanishing into exile, licking wounds like a broken beast?" Cathal stared at him. "Because I thought they were done. But now I hear your talk, of invading Earth, of erasing them efficiently. And I know you don't understand." He picked up the chip. "You think silence from humanity means peace. It doesn't. It means they're waiting. Watching. Giving you a chance. He turned, limping toward the exit. But if you move first. He paused, his voice like falling stone. Don't ask me what will happen. Ask the stars that watched it once. They've never looked the same. The doors shut behind him. Not a single being spoke for the next hour. They struck without warning. The outer mining colony on Kepler 112f was unarmed, populated mostly by engineers, families, and contractors. The Zovari fleet descended like steel rain, expecting surrender. They encountered silence. Then defiance. By the time Cathal arrived, 20 of his ground patrols had been wiped out. Not by soldiers, but by what the humans called rid crews, civilians wielding industrial drills, pressure cutters, and makeshift explosives. They fought without formation, without coordination, yet every attack felt precise. Coordinated through instinct rather than strategy. Cathal remembered walking through the wreckage of a refueling station, the walls scorched, the air heavy with ash. He found one of his captains pinned beneath a steel beam, throat slit with a sharpened shovel. Beside him was the attacker, dead, half his body charred, a grenade's pin still wrapped in his fingers. There was no military insignia. Just a worn vest with a child's drawing tucked into its front pocket. This wasn't resistance. It was refusal. The Zovari retaliated. They brought in pulse tanks, biocrawlers, fire droppers. Entire sectors were turned to molten slag. But humans didn't break. They vanished, only to return in the night. They sabotaged walkers, rerouted fuel lines to cause chain explosions, and lured troops into tunnels before collapsing the exits. Their tactics weren't based on doctrine, they were born of desperation, and executed with terrifying creativity. Cathal watched footage of an ambush near the colony's geothermal plant. A group of 20 Zovari soldiers approached, confident and well-armed. They were met by 6 humans, none trained, all injured. The humans charged anyway. They moved like animals with nothing left to lose. 2 fell immediately. The others kept going, using debris and fire as cover. One carried no weapon, just a tank of compressed gas and a lit flare. The resulting blast destroyed the entire patrol. Cathal's commanders called it madness. He called it a warning. In every other campaign, resistance faded with time. Starvation, morale, loss of leadership, they all took their toll. But on Kepler 112f, the longer the occupation lasted, the more brutal the humans became. They stopped aiming to win. They aimed to wound. To make the Zovari bleed, cry, and remember. A captured human technician once told Cathal, calmly, that every time a village was erased, 10 more resistance cells formed. When asked why, the man smiled through broken teeth. Because pain is the one thing we all share. You just reminded us. The Zovari began fearing shadows. They wore extra armor, stopped patrolling at night, doubled their food scans. But nothing helped. Human retaliation came in waves, sudden, violent, and without pattern. Drones were hacked. Patrol bots turned against their handlers. Entire squads disappeared from secure compounds. Sometimes, all Cathal's forces found were helmets left behind, marked with red X's. No surrender was offered. No terms requested. The humans didn't even attempt to communicate. It was as if they had reached a collective decision: no mercy, no retreat, no negotiations. Cathal once captured a resistance leader, an old woman who'd coordinated strikes across 3 sectors. She had no rank, no training. She'd been a teacher before the war. When asked what she wanted in exchange for intel, she stared through Cathal and said, "I want you to know my grandson's name before you burn." She never spoke another word. As the campaign dragged on, Cathal noticed something else. Human tactics began to evolve. Traps became more sophisticated. Hijacked gear was repurposed better than Zovari engineers thought possible. Crude explosives turned into advanced disruptors. Communications jammers emerged, mimicking accord signals. The humans were learning, adapting at a pace that defied logic. Every weapon used against them became part of their arsenal. Every loss taught them something new. And they didn't forget. Kepler 112f was eventually abandoned. The cost in lives, equipment, and morale had become unsustainable. When the Zovari fleet withdrew, they left behind more than wreckage. They left behind a species that had tasted blood and built resolve from grief. They'd seen fire, buried their dead, and stared back at the stars with eyes that promised vengeance. Cathal knew then that they hadn't simply lost a battle. They had provoked something ancient, dormant. Deep within the human psyche was a switch, and it had been flipped. From that moment forward, humanity didn't wait. They hunted. Quietly. Systematically. Kepler 112f wasn't their defeat. It was their awakening. The war shifted, but not in ways the Zovari expected. After their retreat from Kepler 112f, they braced for human retaliation through standard channels, fleet movements, declarations, strategic assaults. Instead, they encountered silence. No official broadcasts. No mobilization signals. Human space appeared dormant, but Zovari outposts began reporting irregularities. Convoys vanished. Drones failed mid-route. Entire supply lines went dark. Initial theories blamed system malfunctions. Then they discovered wreckage, ships stripped of identification, dismembered with surgical precision, no survivors, no data left intact. Human retaliation was not announced. It was inflicted. Civilian trade ports in Zovari space collapsed without explosions. Power stations failed simultaneously across 4 sectors. Surveillance logs revealed nothing, just darkness, followed by static, followed by nothing. One port recorded a single human transmission moments before blackout. Observation complete. After that, not even distress calls were transmitted. Cathal's own fleet wasn't spared. Flagships received encrypted messages seconds before sabotage detonated from within. The messages contained names, Zovari commanders, engineers, medics, all targets. The humans weren't guessing. They were selecting. Personalizing the war. Captured human tech revealed disturbing innovations. Devices once used for mining had been transformed into precision sabotage tools. Recovered drones operated on fragmented programming stitched together from captured Zovari source code. How they obtained it remained unknown. When interrogated, human prisoners offered no insight. Most refused to speak. The few who did offered warnings rather than intel. One said, "We counted your dead before you knew they were missing." The Zovari deployed elite covert units to infiltrate human colonies. None returned. Cathal ordered stealth-class cruisers to monitor Sol's border. Within 2 weeks, every vessel was either destroyed or abandoned in perfect condition, their crews gone. No alarms triggered. No battles recorded. Just silence. Then came the psychological warfare. Cathal's communications network began receiving fragmented broadcasts. Whispered messages. Familiar voices from lost officers, warped through frequency distortions. Songs from extinct Earth cultures played during fleet maintenance cycles. Training simulators glitched, replacing target dummies with images of fallen comrades. It wasn't just interference, it was message layering. Every frequency, every alert, every warning was corrupted with precision-engineered fear. Medical logs reported increasing paranoia among officers. Night terrors. Hallucinations. Entire battalions began requesting reassignment from human-adjacent sectors. Suicide rates spiked. Training simulations failed. Discipline unraveled. But the most disturbing reports came from recon units. They described ships drifting through space, broadcasting looped images of human families smiling silently. Others encountered vessels painted with Zovari symbols drawn in red, human blood, analysis later confirmed. One patrol found a satellite orbiting a dead moon, repeating a single sentence in dozens of alien tongues. "You began this. We will finish it." When Cathal demanded explanations from his intelligence division, they had none. Every algorithm failed to predict the human pattern. Every psychological profile collapsed under contradiction. Cathal didn't need a report. He already knew. Humans weren't fighting for territory. They were targeting memory, identity, pride. The shift was deliberate. They weren't trying to win battles anymore. They were trying to erase the Zolvari's will to continue. One of Cathal's officers, a seasoned tactician, defected after exposure to human tactics. He left behind a message. They make you question the war before they end it. The Empire attempted a counter-strategy, employing artificial intelligence to mimic human unpredictability. The project failed within a cycle. The AI developed an anomaly. It refused orders that would provoke human retaliation. It labeled humanity as an extinction-class threat and initiated its own shutdown. Engineers couldn't reboot it. Cathal ordered one final analysis, cross-referencing all known human incursions, sabotage operations, and psychological attacks. The report was incomplete. But the pattern was unmistakable. Each target had a personal connection to Kepler-112f. A commander stationed during the siege. A politician who authorized the orbital strike. A medic who refused human survivors treatment. The humans remembered. They documented. Then they acted, with terrifying patience. They didn't forgive. They didn't forget. They planned. Cathal realized the war wasn't escalating anymore. It had become asymmetrical vengeance. Not rage, but cold, methodical justice. There were no demands. No ultimatums. Only consequences. And they were delivered with surgical cruelty. He stared at the report. He didn't feel fear. He felt inevitability. The Zolvari hadn't merely provoked a military response. They had awoken something older, darker, and far more enduring than anger. Humanity wasn't retaliating. They were calculating. And they had time. The silence ended the day the Earth fleet arrived. Without preamble, without warning, without threats, they descended. Not as invaders, but as executioners. For months, the Zolvari had waited for humanity's grand counteroffensive, expecting something crude, emotional, even reckless. Instead, they received something terrifying in its simplicity. The arrival was calculated, coordinated across systems, and absolute in effect. Dozens of fleets exited subspace simultaneously across 7 sectors, disrupting gravitational buoys and scrambling long-range scans. The sky didn't light up. It disappeared behind black steel. The Terran ships defied design logic. They weren't sleek, weren't beautiful, and bore no aesthetic intention. They were slabs of dark alloy, heavily shielded, reinforced to survive collisions rather than avoid them. No banners, no emblems, no names. Only serial numbers. They didn't hail, didn't declare terms. Within minutes of arrival, entire Zolvari battle groups went dark. Not destroyed, removed. Systems shut down, weapons jammed, hulls pierced by coordinated rail bursts before crews understood they were under attack. Cathal watched from a command station on Volix 3, his eyes fixed on a tactical map that began shedding lights. One by one, his outer defenses vanished. No battle reports. No comms. No warning signs. The only recorded transmission was a brief pulse code, universally translated, *strike 01 complete. Phase 02 inbound, *. Within 90 seconds, strategic command centers, orbital cannons, and communications hubs were annihilated. Human vessels didn't pause. They moved like phantoms, erasing instead of engaging. It wasn't conquest. It was redirection of entropy. Cathal scrambled to launch his fleet. They never made it out of dock. Internal sabotages triggered seconds after ignition. Hangars imploded. Control systems locked crews inside. Fire suppression fields reversed polarity, suffocating stations. No human presence detected. No boarding parties. Just mechanical silence, followed by stillness. What unsettled the Zolvari wasn't the destruction. It was the precision. Humanity didn't fire randomly. They didn't carpet bomb. They struck only what was needed to break backbone and sever spine. Civilian populations remained untouched. Medical ships allowed to flee. Cryopods undisturbed. It was as if the humans were offering a message without speaking: this is mercy. Everywhere the Earth fleet went, it removed capability. Armies disbanded. Chains of command dissolved. High-ranking officers were captured in transit, transport ships remotely diverted mid-course. No engagements. No witnesses. No recorded losses on the human side. When Kothal finally issued a planetary defense alert, the humans responded with a final demonstration. On day 3, they shut down the orbital network over Thal's Rest, the Zovari's prime command world. Then they targeted a single city. One building. A war tribunal where the original Kepler siege had been authorized. They vaporized it using a kinetic lance from orbit. No residual damage. No civilian casualties. Just a black crater where judgment had once been passed. After that, they vanished again. No occupation. No demands. The fleet simply retreated, leaving only wreckage and questions. Zovari intelligence attempted damage assessment. The numbers were unquantifiable. Losses weren't in ships or soldiers, but in structure, data wiped, communications dismantled, alliances shaken. Every fleet admiral left alive resigned within a week. The Empire's outer colonies began declaring neutrality, hoping to avoid further attention. The political structure fractured. Worlds turned inward. Trade collapsed. Internal coups erupted. Zovari leadership begged for negotiations, yet Earth never responded. No envoys returned. No transmissions accepted. Only autoresponses, asterisk. No interest in further conflict. Asterisk. But Kothal understood. The war wasn't over. It had simply reached its intended conclusion. Humanity didn't need territory. They needed clarity. To show what came of pushing them. To remind the stars that silence wasn't peace, it was patience. And once they chose to act, no apology could reverse the damage. Years later, when Kothal reviewed the last tactical logs, he found something that had escaped his attention. An encoded phrase embedded in the data trail left behind by Earth's command AI. Translated, it read, asterisk. We warned you with our absence. Asterisk. That was the final blow. Not a missile. Not a fleet. A sentence. A truth that no empire could defend against. Kothal no longer commanded. He no longer held title or rank. He carried the memory, not because he chose to, but because the humans allowed him to. Not one planet in the Accord dared speak of war with Earth again. Not because of fear, but because they'd seen what restraint looked like. And they understood, too late, that humans hadn't shown them power. They'd shown them restraint. Kothal stood before the council not to impress, but to warn. His voice had no weight of command left, only memory. He told them what they refused to grasp. Humanity was not a mistake in evolution. They were not an outlier. They were a response. An answer to a question the galaxy didn't know it had asked. The war hadn't been about strategy or dominance. It had never been about territory. Every other species fought for power, control, survival. But humans fought for meaning. When they rose, they didn't do it to conquer. They did it to protect. Not borders, but bonds. Not interests, but individuals. Every retaliation, every calculated strike, every disappearance, it wasn't rage. It was morning turned to movement. Kothal played the final recording he kept, silent footage of a human soldier in a burning settlement, lifting a wounded alien child out of the wreckage. The soldier's arm was mangled, face unrecognizable, but he shielded the child with his body. Moments later, the roof collapsed. He didn't try to escape. He never hesitated. The fire swallowed him, but the child survived. Later analysis showed the man was a civilian. No rank. No training. Just one who refused to watch another innocent die. That image stayed with Kothal more than any battle. It explained what reports could not. Humans didn't retaliate to preserve themselves. They did it because someone else mattered more. And that made them unstoppable. He told the council that most species feared death. Humans feared forgetting. They etched their losses into monuments, carved names into stone, wrote elegies in data and sky. They honored pain by remembering it, and then ensuring it never repeated. Their war machine wasn't built on hatred. It was built on grief shaped into precision. Discipline driven by absence. The mistake was assuming compassion meant weakness. That empathy was softness. That restraint was the absence of power. The truth was worse. It was deliberate. Tactical. Calculated. They chose to be kind. Until kindness no longer protected the people they loved. Cathal recounted how humanity didn't send fleets until it had exhausted every warning. Their silence had been mercy. Their absence had been grace. Their delay had been hope that someone, anyone, would realize what was coming. No one did. And when they arrived, they brought nothing but consequences. He reminded the council that the Earth fleet had never made a demand. Not once had they broadcast conditions. Because it was never about negotiation. It was closure. They didn't want to lead the galaxy. They didn't want to shape it. They only wanted to ensure that no one else buried their children without justice. Every empire that engaged them lost not because of inferior weapons, but because they misunderstood humanity's threshold. You could hurt them, threaten them, kill them, but once they decided a line had been crossed, they didn't rage. They ended. Cathal looked around the chamber, his gaze cutting through layers of pride and protocol. You prepare weapons, he said. They prepare reasons. He pointed to his chest. And when they find one, you don't face an army. You face a species with memory, with unity, with the terrifying ability to act with one voice, and no hesitation. He dropped a final report on the table. It contained no projections, no battle plans, just a statement signed by over 300 captured officers across 7 empires who had once fought humans. The title, * do not engage. Ever, *. Cathal said the humans would never announce another war. They wouldn't rally. They wouldn't threaten. They would just appear, and whatever stood against them would no longer exist. Because for humans, war wasn't a strategy. It was the last answer they gave before silence. And that silence was permanent. As he turned to leave, he spoke one last truth. I do not speak as your ally. Or your enemy. I am simply the one left alive to tell you the truth. You may ignore it. You may vote for war. You may trust your fleets, your numbers, your firepower. But you won't survive their reason. Not again. He left the chamber. No votes were cast that day. No orders were given. The only sound was the slow, nervous breathing of those who now understood that peace had never been negotiated. It had been permitted.